Gracelife Church pastor James Coates has found a new secret location to hold his unmasked church services somewhere in central Alberta. He began his first secret sermon by explaining that he had written and prepared early last week by writing about Psalm 56.
Psalm 56, and I spent Tuesday studying that psalm in preparation for our service.
Which is basically a plea to God for guidance from a person or group who's being oppressed. His warehouse was jailed the following day, so his sermon plans had to be scrapped.
And then woke up Wednesday morning to the imprisonment of our facility. When they jailed our facility,
the following Sunday rolled around and he had found a new chapter to discuss. At nearly the exact same time that Gracelife's main warehouse was the site of a large protest, Coates' flock congregated in a hidden location to hold this week's service.
and it seemed to me there was another psalm that would be more appropriate for an occasion like this.
Coates decided this week Psalm 2 would suit the situation better.
Is incredibly appropriate and really needs no introduction. Turn to Psalm 2.
Which is a poem about fighting a government that's been corrupted by heathen rage. Admittedly, the term heathen rage comes from the King James Version of the Bible. Well, from what I found, Coates prefers the 1995 version of the New American Standard Bible and the English Standard Version for his sermons. So from this point forward, I'll use the NASB for quotes.
You shall break them with a rod of iron. You shall shatter them like earthenware.
Psalm 2 finishes off with a little hint at the impending rapture, something that most Gracelife sermons touch on at one point or another.
For his wrath may soon be kindled.
Coates believes that the current Canadian government is the corrupt government that Psalm 2 speaks about.
And again, what we're going to see is that what is taking place in the drama of this psalm is really what is taking place at present, both here and around the world.
And not only the Canadian government, but the UN is involved in this conspiracy against his and all other mask-free churches.
The kings and rulers of the earth have joined forces. This is the United Nations.
He then talks about how he's quite sure that the current state of geopolitics is leading to a single Christian world government where every country will be ruled by one Christian leader.
And call governments to submit to him as king and to govern in accord with the very word that will judge them on Judgment Day. A day that will come with the full fury of God's wrath when the king of his choosing brings with him his kingdom.
Pastor James then circles back to a part of the Bible that comes up in many Gracelife sermons, Romans 13.
Let's go ahead and begin by reading the passage. Romans chapter 13.
He even references this particular chapter in the title of one of his sermons from last year. He loves this chapter.
This passage is the most definitive passage in the Bible on the role of government.
Coates interprets this chapter in a very specific way. He believes that all earthly authorities come from God.
The rulers that are currently in place are in place because he appointed them.
So if any of these earthly authorities enact laws that disagree with God, the people under their rule can still follow God, but must accept the punishment for doing what they believe is God's work. This is Coates' main theological justification for his continued defiance of Alberta Health Services regulations.
This is defiance.
Gracelife even has a disclaimer that comes up right as you open their website that links directly to the Romans 13 sermon from last year and refers to it as a theological defense. The problem with this defense is that it strongly implies that democracy is an utter illusion. If all authorities are put in place by God, regardless of political system, then we're all kidding ourselves when we're voting in elections.
And so this is insane.
And if these leaders that were put in place all over the world by God are colluding against that same God, that would make Coates' God either impotent or reactionary, capable of only wiping out those who disobey him instead of actually stopping these people beforehand.
The Psalms speak of God being angry every day with the wicked. God's nostrils are flaring with the intensity of this rage. He will be ruthless in the execution of his justice.
Coates then finds a way to tie this new Psalm 2 that he's discussing from earlier.
You shall break them with a rod of iron. You shall shatter them like earthenware.
to a cult leader classic, Revelations 19.
And he will rule them with a rod of iron.
For those of you who don't know your Bible verses, Revelations 19 is the part that explicitly describes what's going to happen during the apocalypse and the rapture. He, of course, follows this up with another reminder to all of his followers that they may have to die for this cause.
It's going to cost you your life.
Now, as a person who grew up going to Catholic masses at least monthly, I can personally attest that this is not normal. Typical pastors and priests and ministers in the Christian faith don't spend most of every sermon dedicated to the end of the world, death, and a war against all human governments. Jim Jones did this. David Koresh did this. L. Ron Hubbard did this. Homophobic megachurch pastor John MacArthur does this. And Scientology chairman and alleged wife murderer David Miscavige does this. It's not a coincidence that Coates' sermons mirror so closely MacArthur's. Coates writes letters to MacArthur regularly and takes many of his talking points directly from MacArthur's speeches and sermons, as reported by the Edmonton Sun recently. Gracelife Church is becoming more isolated from normal society every single week. New membership is only likely available through existing member referral at this point, so they've effectively cut themselves off from any outside influence towards their increasingly apocalyptic philosophy. Since they've shown no indication that they plan to stop holding in-person unmasked services, the altercation with Alberta Health Services will likely continue. We here at the Keep Times will continue to cover this story as it develops. We now have a Patreon page where we post videos daily and hours worth of extra footage to all of the stories that we cover and all the ones we've covered in the past. There will be a lot of bonus footage and behind-the-scenes footage. And don't forget to follow us on TikTok, Reddit, Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. We're on all of them and we post stuff almost every day. Thanks for watching.